What's going on, everybody? Hail. Happy Tuesday. So, another Dark Horse Discourse here. Let's see who's in the chat. We have Miss Katie Did. Welcome. Thank you. Yes, for showing my stuff. Always appreciate that. And yeah, appreciate the hint there on how to pin it to the top of the chat. So I did that. We have Zombie Boy. What's going on? And we have Mr. Andrew Rowland. Hey, welcome. So this week, I've been called a grifter, smug, and a spurg, all just because I existed. Ugh. Who says such a thing? Oh yeah, we've seen and heard that recently. So first off, we're gonna start off with some Twitter trash because I mean, there's always tons of it, but this one actually inspired the main topic that we'll focus on today, which is in the thumbnail of equality, and it's based around well people mocking quality because that's the sad state of our culture is that there's a lot of people actually mocking the concept of quality. Wild. But yeah, let's hop into this Twitter trash here. All right, share my screen here. All right, so let's look at one of the agitators' posts. I think this is technically like chapter 24 or something of his complaining about me, which is quite sad and hilarious at the same time. But within his tweet is a quote tweet from a guy named who goes by Hero Shack, who's also been tugging at my nuts on the internet for quite some time now. I don't get it, but the guy has been obsessing over the fact that I made a mini comic and that I labeled it as a mini comic. I mean, I'm talking tens of tweets and replies. He's been in my YouTube videos, he's been in my tweets and other people's tweets, just like, I can't believe he's called this a mini comic, as if it's like some insult to the comic industry. So, student of God says, "Equality." So again, mocking again the concept of quality. Some great, you know, Twitter etiquette here. He says, "B.A. Turner has a lot to say about making comments. Comics. Let's look at this." All right. First off, it's not a comic; it's a mini comic. I've been very clear in all of my um, YouTube streams, in my Indiegogo, everything that it is a mini comic that does not have a story. Its purpose is to introduce all the major and supporting characters, give some depictions of the key scenes, and give reference material and text about all the characters. They're essentially like oversized trading cards, but in comic format, right? Comic art, you have some panelization, etc. So let's watch this video here of him. So I first off, I appreciate the fact that he, I guess, backed it, but I knew that he had picked up the mini comic just to do this, and there was somebody else that did the same thing with the novels, but he literally just picked it up to make a video about complaining about the fact that it was called a mini comic, or he says comic, because he had again he'd made all those comments and stuff prior to picking it up. So let's check this out here. Right. That statement makes me crack up. It's called a mini comic. It's as if one of us doesn't know what a comic really is. Hence why it's called a mini comic and not a comic. It's literally not a traditional comic. I never marketed it as such. I never misled any of my backers or any people. It's explained explicitly what its function is in the campaign. And if for some reason you equate what I've said and what's in the Indiegogo campaign as a traditional comic, well, that's a you problem, not a me problem. And I also have been very clear that yeah, it's like 15 pages. The length of it ties into the fact that it's called mini comic. I would never say, "Oh, this is a full comic issue," and then only give you 15 pages, for example, and have no story. Like that's madness. So yeah, he literally picked it up just to make this video. And then, of course, Mr. Student of God has to do a quote tweet to try to highlight the fact that he thinks I don't actually know what quality comics are because I haven't made a full traditional comic. Well, that's funny because I'm pretty sure he and others they support content creators that have never made films. They've never actually been in the film industry. They've never done anything in relation to it other than complain about films or complain about comics, right? Just like Eric July for years only talked about comics. He didn't actually create it, but I don't think Student of God was giving him shit about it. Difference is I'm constantly reading comics. I am studying comics so that I can actually make a quality comic because one does not just simply start putting words down on a paper and say, "Yep, I have a comic script." No, you have to learn from real life examples and the best of the best in order to produce a quality comic. So I'd say that especially since I've worked with comic creators, I'm currently working with an artist and writer creating my comic. I am learning from them and I'm learning from the books that I read. So I'd say I'm qualified in a decent amount of ways to say whether or not art in comics may be of quality. Now, of course, it's subjective to an extent, but I can pick up a book like, let's say, Sin City versus Isam and be able to say, this is why Sin City is a phenomenal book, and here is why I don't think Isam is a phenomenal book. And here are the differences between the two, right? Here are the gaps in storytelling, in character arcs, and having the characters be three-dimensional, etc. These are things that you can learn and then make judgments and criticisms on existing works. It's pretty simple. So if you're going to call me out for not having a traditional comic finished, then you got a lot of YouTubers to call out. A lot. Because they're not actually making comics, they're not actually making films. Many of them are not making music, and they're not politicians either yet. They talk about it, they judge it, they criticize it. So, quite funny in my opinion. And yes, these are the very people that will also say that that little rant I went on was is a spurg because they equate telling your opinion and just voicing it calmly as spurging. I also think it's insulting to use that term, in my opinion. But yeah, but that goes back to why do they say I'm a grifter, I'm smug, and I'm a spurg, right? It's because I speak my mind freely, because I'm not afraid to criticize popular YouTubers that they basically view as icons, and because I associate with people that they hate for whatever ridiculous reasons. That's it. So yeah, go for it. Call me it all you'd like. I'm just gonna laugh at you because it's really sad. Yeah, that's true. Eric had like an 8-page like concept art book for $70. Mhm. Yeah, my nickname for him, since it's Student of God. I think it's student of greasy old dildos. It's a very good way to spell out the God because obviously it's an insult to God and Christianity to actually say you're a student of him based on how he acts and things that he says and does. So it's quite hilarious. And this one's quite interesting as well. Said that, and this is where the grift part comes in. He basically wrote a book and tried to grift off the CG space by including a mini comic. He's a beginner, and I would have happily supported him on his journey of growth, but he portrays himself to already have superior knowledge and opinions to others. Hmm. How is it a grift to be honest and say, "Hey, I have two novels with words, right, with prose, and a mini comic with art"? How is that a grift? Right? It would be a grift if I said, "Hey, I have a full traditional comic," and then I supply what I supplied. That would have been wrong. Or if I said, "Oh yeah, these novels are filled with illustrations," and then there's no illustrations, right? There's a lot of things that could fit that description, none of which I did. And I don't claim to have superior knowledge or opinions in compared to others. I'm just not blind to the blatant overhyping of certain works in the space. And I'm not afraid to speak my mind on them either. And again, I'm a student of comics right now. I am reading constantly. I'm learning from the best. And as you read, you learn, and then you can actually have more rounded thoughts and opinions that are based on said experience in reading those books and studying and learning from them. So, pretty simple concept. All right. So, that goes into the main topic here, which is the fact that we're seeing more and more people just mocking the concept of quality, right? Just like we just saw there. And I'm seeing all these tweets and tweet responses where people, it, it's like they're mocking it and trying to, it's weird, like punch up towards quality, either because A, their own insecurities, or they're ashamed of the content or the books that they're producing themselves, or B, they're just mimicking talking points, right, of their favorite YouTuber, their favorite creator, because it's their way of showing that, hey, I'm one of the good guys. I'm opposing the bad people, right? And this is primarily anti-CG people that are doing this stuff. But you never see this in the film side of things, right? You never see people saying, "I can't believe this creator or this film director is taking this long and he's so focused on quality. Why isn't he putting out more movies per year or one movie a year or whatever?" You never see that, right? People want a monumental film. So what is so wrong with comic creators wanting to put out a monumental comic? There should be absolutely nothing wrong with that. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with a creator or an artist that wants to put insane detail in their book either. That's what the most acclaimed directors do as well, right? They're very detail oriented, down to the littlest thing on each scene. And that's what makes them phenomenal film directors and writers. Now, I'm not saying everyone needs to do that. And this is where I think the whole discussion and concept of quality gets misconstrued and twisted, is that folks are assuming, right, by calling people elitists and gatekeepers and all this nonsense, that everyone has the same expectation of quality across the board, right? When someone is criticizing a comic and saying, hey, we don't appreciate that it has 3D assets or there's inconsistencies in the story, things like that, right? That they're saying, hey, every single book, regardless of the amount of resources and level that creator at, has to be a masterpiece. That is complete nonsense. Nobody is expecting a brand new creator with minimal resources to create a masterpiece. Nobody. If anything, from what I've seen, almost everyone in the space has an understanding and gives a lot of grace to new creators because they know, like, hey, you're new to this, right? Your first book may not be phenomenal, right? It's about gaining experience, right? Practice makes perfect and all that. But it's also because we know most new creators do not have a lot of resources, right? They don't have a huge YouTube base. They do not have a huge Twitter following. They don't have connections. They're not going to have the name to attract big named artists. That's natural, right? And so they're given natural grace. They're not going to have people like me, Shane, and others that speak about quality. We do not have the same expectation for a brand new creator with barely any experience in comparison to a pro, for example. Of course, there's higher expectations for a pro because they've already been successful. They've already proven that they can provide quality. They are going to naturally be held to a higher standard. The same goes for people with a ton of resources. And what you'll see is people defending, let's say, YouTube creators, right, that come into the space and they do their first comic, and everyone's like, "Oh, it's their first comic, right? We shouldn't expect it to be phenomenal. Like, oh, mistakes will be made, and oh, it's okay that the first one wasn't that great, right?" And I say, bullshit. Why? Because a normal small indie creator comes in with basically no money to create a comic, hence needing crowdfunding. Maybe they'll raise a couple thousand. Maybe they're lucky, they get 5 or 10,000, which is still not much. So they're limited in terms of the amount of detailed art they can get. They're limited in terms of how large their team can be, the type of colorists they get, all of that. So they have limitations, whereas someone that comes in with tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, they can literally pick anyone they want, especially if they have a big name. They can go out and get a pro. They can get the best of the best that's out there in terms of a line artist, in terms of colorist. They could team up with a writer. They could learn from them. They could get training from them. They could hire the best editors out there. There's literally no excuse to come into the space when you have all the resources and connections in the world and not have a banger. And if for some reason they don't have a banger, most people wouldn't really care unless they had a huge ego. They came in cocky, saying, "Oh, well, I'm gonna do it better. Marvel and DC sucks, right?" Nonsense like that. They're acting like, "Oh, I'm gonna have the best new thing since sliced bread. I'm gonna dance on the graves of the executives of Wonder Bread," right? You say stuff like that, regardless of size, and then you don't actually match or beat said quality. Don't be surprised if you get criticized. It's no different than Disney, right? It's no different than Marvel. Star Wars had a history of top-notch films, phenomenal quality, and then they started slipping. Everyone has the right to say, "Hey, there's literally no reason why you cannot get back to the quality you had at, let's say, the first 6 films." You have the resources, right? The talent's there. So many directors and writers would kill to work on Star Wars, so what's the excuse? There is no excuse. It's just poor decisions. And it's the same thing that happens in indie comics, essentially. And when it comes to really small creators, there's no one going around just bashing smaller creators for no reason and saying, "Oh, I can't believe it's this low of quality. Like, you should be at the same standard as everyone else." No, they're given a lot of grace, unless they're extremely cocky and they're bashing pros and those that do have the experience and have been proven as being successful in the space. Then they're going to get slapped back when they take shots at said people. Then they're going to get attention towards their project, and people are going to criticize it and be like, "Hey, you have literally no space to talk. You should up your game before you start talking like that to creators that have already been successful and have the like proven talent." So this nonsense that, oh, there's elitists in the indie comic space. They expect everyone to have a perfect book. They expect everyone to be at the pro level. No, they don't. In fact, those people that you're claiming to be elitists are actually bringing people onto their channels that have little experience, that have very small campaigns, right? Regardless of the quality of art, they're still giving them a chance to promote their work. If they were elitists and gatekeepers, they wouldn't let anyone on their channel, they wouldn't promote or retweet anyone unless they were at the very top tier level of talent. But that has not been the case, especially in CG. And myself and so many others are proof of that, where we've gotten on their channels, they've promoted our work, and they didn't expect us to have, again, this masterpiece right out of the gate. They understood the position that we're in, but what they recognize is that we want to help others, right? We want to not only grow ourselves, but help others grow. That's how the entire space grows. That's how CG grows. They recognize that and they recognize the effort. And that goes into the other big part of this is effort. Okay. If someone has minimal resources, minimal connections, all of that, but they go all out in terms of learning how to write, they study, they work with, whoever they can, right? Whether it's editors or co-writer, and they make sure that within their budget, right, they have the best art that they can, everyone's going to appreciate it and they're going to understand it. And there are cases where books may not have phenomenal art, but the story is top notch because the effort was there. No one is going to knock them for that. Now, again, if there's someone with a ton of resources that's trying to push quantity over quality, just trying to brag about, oh, I've released a book every 3 months, or I've released X amount of books this year, but you can tell they didn't go all out on the art. They didn't hire the best people within their budget. And if they're the artists themselves, right, they're skimping on background details, right? Things of that nature, using AI, which would be the worst case. That's when people have the right, in my opinion, especially to call them out and criticize them because it's apparent that they didn't put all the effort in it. When it's apparent that people are working hard and they're putting the maximum effort into it, people are going to applaud that. But it's very obvious at times when folks are not putting in maximum effort and they're more focused on just bragging about, hey, I've put out this many books in this time period versus, well, yeah, but did book one to book two have a significant improvement? Did book two to book three, right? Is there actually like growth and improvement? If not, you shouldn't really be saying anything about quality. And we've seen that in quite a few instances. So those are the two things that really bother me is the fact that people are not taking into consideration the fact that effort and resources play a big part in the expectations of quality. Myself and others do not expect the same level of quality from everyone. It comes down to the talent that's available for them, the resources that they have first, and then from there, effort. How much effort are they putting into it themselves and towards hiring the best team possible? So, all right, let's check in with the chat. Ooh, all right. Nice. I don't know what dog shit is, as I don't eat nor produce it. All right, Eccentric says, Turner, I don't care what anyone else says about you. You are all right in my book. Thank you, sir. And likewise, everyone should make sure they check out Eccentric's channel as well as his active campaign on Fund My Comic. This is a guy that's been cranking out books the last couple of years. He promotes others, he brings them on their channel. So again, let's get him some traction. Let's sub to his channel and let's back his book as well. Thank you, Eccentric. Just because you have money doesn't mean people would be willing to work with you. In certain circumstances, sure, that might be the case. Like if you say controversial things, for example, or have controversial content in your books, but the talent pool is huge out there, right? Whether it's pros or non pros that have a lot of talent, if you have the money, and especially if you have a following, you have a much higher chance of picking them up because they're going to get growth off of your base, right? They want to get their name out there and recognized. Maybe you won't get guys in the mainstream because they're afraid of guilt by association, right? We all deal with that just in the small space that we're in, but people that have a lot of resources and a huge following, there's no excuse that they can't find a talented artist. That's for sure. Especially look at CG and other people in the indie space, right? They speak their mind. They're not afraid to talk about controversial topics. So if you pay them and you're good to them, should be no issue picking up some talented artists. Andrew Campbell says the quality of the story is the foundation. The art in the original One Punch Man was trash, but got there where it is now because of a great story. And that's part of what I was saying there is like, hey, if you don't have all the resources and connections to hire a pro, right? Which is most of us. Let's say you gotta hire someone with a low page rate because you don't have a following, you're afraid you're not going to get a great funding on Indiegogo or whatever, then you make sure that your script, that your writing, your dialogue, your inner monologue, all that is phenomenal. That is what makes the impact on the reader. If you can catch their attention, make the book relatable, really excite them, make them wanting more, right? You can do that with the story, even if the art isn't the best. We've seen examples in the mainstream in the past and indie comics too, where some artists may not be everyone's cup of tea, but the writing in the book makes it stand out. I mean, for me, an example would be Batman Year One. I love Frank Miller's writing. Absolutely love it. I mean, it hits you in the chest, hits you in the face. I mean, that is one that he makes every single bit of dialogue, inner monologue hit you. It's impactful. But I wasn't a big fan of the art in that, honestly. But I didn't let it distract me because I was too enthralled by the writing and the story, what was going on with the character. So everyone has the ability to learn and write a great story if they really put their mind to it and they get creative. So I agree with what you're saying. Lady says, I have a 3 book rule for most new creators, or at least if they're new to me. I have to see something of value in the first issue, and I expect positive growth over the next two. If not, I can't see it, I drop out. Then yeah, that's understandable. Yeah, definitely they get grace the first couple books. I mean, everyone's learning. People are going to have mistakes in the first couple books, especially folks that may not have the resources, right? Like I mentioned, to get certain talent and all that. Um, but yeah, that's why the smaller creators they get a lot of grace, and they should. They should. The most realistic comic art never gets the numbers that are that more cartoony and animated comics do. Just look at One Piece. Yep, yep. What's going on, Timescales? Welcome. Thanks for joining. It did says if they're such elitists, then how come EVS paid for special variant cover from Sven Stoffels for Justin's Pencil Down campaign? No one asked him to do it, but he did it, and I think it's because he saw like the effort and the passion into it. Exactly, right. And Ethan just hired right Salty Draws to do his variant cover on Elephant, and then Camelot hired Salty Draws, right? Even though Salty has a lot of experience, right, and he's actually worked for some big companies and all of that, he is still getting his name out there in the indie space. He doesn't have a huge following or anything, but he's getting picked up by big names in the space, right? Whether it's YouTube or indie comics, even some of the writers that EVS and other artists that he's hired recently, right? They're not big names, but he sees their passion. He sees how great their writing and their art is, and that it's a good fit for the stories that he's putting out there. So again, if he was an elitist, to your point, he would have said, "Hey, unless you're like an established pro from the big two, I'm not going to hire you." But there he is giving smaller creators a chance. And there's a lot of people like Shane Davis, Joe Sontag, and others that they put in John Malin, right? They do supplemental books, and they'll have art featured by whether it's Chris Graves or Corey Barton or Clayton, right? They're all getting a chance to get on some pretty big books by big creators. So if they were elitists, then that chance wouldn't have happened. Yep, definitely. A unique style jumps out of the crowd, especially when it comes to art, right? Frank Miller's a great example. He may not be everyone's cup of tea, but even for me, the first time I read one of his books, like it kind of threw me off. But then as I got into the writing, it the art just spoke to me differently. Like it really lined up with his storytelling, with his style of writing, to where it made you appreciate the art, right? The grittiness of the characters, how he portrayed like the media, for example, made him look very ugly, right? And deceitful. And you're like, oh, this rougher style, it really fits the story. And so it grows on you and you really appreciate it over time. All right. Mindy says, it's not entirely true that you just give everyone good graces. CG harped on our first book for the first 2 years and still do, simply because they do not like us. I don't know. I wasn't there. It could be because of interactions that you have with them. I'm not sure how you treated them and vice versa. So it may not just be simply, again, it may not, like I had mentioned before, it may not simply be because of the quality, but it could have been because of the interaction. Could have been slapbacks. I don't know. I wasn't around back then. I know certain people are not a fan of the type of books you guys do, but I try not to even comment on that. I just know it's not my cup of tea. So could have been it's not their cup of tea either. Right? Broken Entertainment, welcome. All right, here we have a question. So, Mr. Badass Turner, I have a question for you. Did you write your two novels to fund promote your coming comic, or are you making a comic to further promote your novels? It's actually a mixture of both. I initially didn't even have plans to make a comic. My focus, I'm the type that I focus on one thing. That's all I can think about. And so for 7 years, it was the novels. And but once I got the first wraparound cover by Corey Barton, I fell in love with seeing the characters come to life. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I need to see more characters come to life. So I had him do book two, and I'm like, man, I just want to get more art. And I'm like, well, I'm not ready to do a full comic. I started really getting into comics, reading them more, but I'm like, I don't want to just jump into it. I don't want to rush it. I don't want to fall on my face. And I didn't have the following to where I was confident that I could raise enough money to even make a comic, right? Without losing money. And so I'm like, well, how can I just do a little bit, dip my toe in essentially, right? Into the comic world, get art commission, get some experience, get to know people, network. And I'm like, you know what? Novels just don't have enough visualization, right? There's not enough art, whether it's on the covers, whether it's illustrations in the books. I'm like, I'm going to do something different. I'm just going to do like an art book, a mini comic, right? Just brings all those characters to life so that people can know exactly what every character looks like, the style, so that when they're reading, they can play it out like a film and just really focus on the story. And as the campaign got more and more successful, I got that confidence. I grew my following a little bit. I got to know more people, got more confident doing this, right? Getting on streams to where I'm like, okay, I think I can get a comic funded. So I'm going to use the funds from this, right? All the profit that I've made and continue to make, put it directly into the comics so that I can get as much of it done before launching the campaign and I can have it be as seamless as possible. Take all the lessons learned from the first campaign, apply it to the second campaign so that again I can really really make an impact with the comic. And obviously working with a handful of different artists, getting to see their different styles, I figured out exactly the art style and the people that I wanted to work with, given that they're available right for the second book. And so it was a learning experience, and it just kind of fell into my lap that the novels and the art in the mini comic got enough people's attention to where I got again that confidence and that passion to like, I'm gonna make a comic. And then once I'm done with the first comic script, I'm gonna go back to writing the third novel. So really, I'd like to be able to provide, every other campaign that's like comic, novel, or maybe two comics and then a novel can have them on the same campaign, right? I can provide something for both mediums, and especially for folks that like novels and comics. So yeah, I want them. I want it to grow. I want my universe to grow, the Vigilantes Creed universe, whether it's comics or novels. Just want to get the story out there, right? But it's awesome to have the chance to do it in prose style, so I can go into intense details. Um, and then also with the through visualization, through comics to make more of an impact with the art, with the dialogue, with the inner monologue, right? So yeah, appreciate the question though. Let's see. All right, Mindy says we came onto the scene with our first book, no help. Me busting my ass on pages, putting as much effort as I possibly could, and we made 28,000. Still got shat in by CG. Again, I don't know what your guys' interactions were like. I've heard stuff from both sides, was not involved. So I'm not going to make a judgment call on that. I can only go based off of how I've seen you guys talk to people, including myself. And that's simply it. But I know that again, the type of books that you guys make don't really fit in with CG. It's not a lot of people's cup of tea, and they may not even be willing to promote that type of stuff. Personally, I wouldn't be willing to, because again, it's not my cup of tea, and it's not really the stuff that I would like to promote. But that's more of a personal preference thing. So yeah, this one's interesting. I think a lot of folks have seen this. So the talent agency refusing to work with Eric, despite Eric having money, demonstrates that the agency and talent just have principles. And so that's yeah, you can kind of flip the discussion around and be like, yeah, some agencies, some people may just be like, hey, I'm not willing to work with someone that speaks or acts a certain way or does a certain type of comic, right? It could be nudity, things like that. Like there are creators that are just like, hey, I won't touch that. Sorry, I'm not willing to work on it. So I don't know. Some people are going to frame it. I mean, there's not facts, right? There's no names, there's no specific details around why they dropped him and they didn't want to work with him. So you can't really say that they did it unjustly. They may have simply seen some things that had been said or how he had acted or other people in his team have been involved in and been like, just not a good fit for us, right? We don't really want to associate with this. And they have every right to do that. It doesn't make them a bad company or anything like that. And it's not like they went out and smeared him or anything like that. So they just realize it's not a good fit for them. And that happens too with, writers and stuff. They'll end up, we've seen people hire artists and then they just don't jive with them, whether it's their style, how they communicate, or, getting in arguments and stuff. And they may just say, hey, let's just cut the cord. Not a good fit. So what's going on? Bayou Bomber, welcome. Also, Corey Barton, the awesome high quality artist that I had in my mini comic. Oh no, what's going on? Yeah, again, some people may consider certain types of books trash because of, again, whether it's nudity or something. I don't like to really use such harsh, I guess, words and stuff when it comes to creators, but again, I can't really comment because wasn't there, and I'd have to actually see context and backstories to all of it. So I would just say best to just move on. Can't even read all these comments. You guys definitely. I know you Wheelers want to talk and you want to try to get into people's ears and make them anti CG, but You're literally wasting your breath. Like, can you can have your opinion and all that, right? But you're not going to convince myself or anybody else in the chat to jump ship. I mean, you're just not going to get into our ears like that. People are hypocrites. Promoting nasty crap. Yep. Katie is not a comic book creator, first off. And it's quite weak to always go back to that argument, right? Oh, the fan fiction and this and that has absolutely nothing to do with the comic space at all. And you're just playing into the game of all the folks spreading rumors and nonsense about someone who didn't do anything to anyone in this space other than criticize and comment on some people's favorite YouTube creator. But then people are going to act like it's justified to try to dive into their personal life and take shots at her and her family. Like, come on, you as a woman should not be okay with how people treated her and the behavior around her. It's absolutely despicable. She supports a lot of us creators. She promotes us. Everyone appreciates that. We need more people like that. So you can leave that at the door. Again, you're trying way too hard. Doesn't matter if it's satire. Some people just not might be into smut in terms of creating comic books, especially in CG. Yep. Yeah. What do I think of Rippaverse's characters? So I think I touched on this a little bit the last stream, but quite honestly, from the very beginning, when I saw the first art for ISOM, it just didn't capture my attention. It just looked very generic, just a very basic costume design. The naming to me was just horrible as well, like ISOM, but with no explanation of what it stands for. Right? You were thinking it's like an acronym or something, but I guess it's just a name, but it was extremely vague, right? And the cover art, like Kingdom White's cover art for the first ISOM was good. That one looked intriguing, just because it made it feel like Luke Cage, which again, that's why I also felt like it was a little bit generic. I was like, oh, this is like another Luke Cage. Um, but yeah, there's just nothing about it that really stood out to me. And then once you saw Yaira again, it's like, another character with like ice powers or something, another like boss chick. It just nothing about it really captured my attention. And I was like, you know what? There's books like Reaper Destroyer, like Death, Death, Death out there by smaller creators that's just got phenomenal art, phenomenal character designs. I'm gonna go support those guys. They need the money in order to bring these projects to life versus right someone that this is play money, right? Um, for them, and they're doing this because it's a window of opportunity versus a passion, in my opinion. So, um, yeah, there's just nothing about it that caught my attention, and all the new characters that have followed, same thing, right? Like Horseman, like looks like one of the Batman like characters or whatever. Just in the naming conventions, it's, like, all the names are just horrible in my opinion. Gooding and all that. It's like it's hard to get attached to a character that, again, the name is just so blah. All right. Yeah, people, mods, feel free to mute, give timeouts to people that are going to call people in the chat weirdos and things like this. This is proving my point, right? Agitation. This is what you guys are trying to do. You're trying to get into people's ears. And then when people do not agree with you, they don't fall in line, you do the teenage girl attacks and all that. It's embarrassing. Yeah, I'm gonna agree with this comment right here. Yep, names are the worst part. Yeah, it's okay. Comes with the territory, you know. But all I know is people that are good to me, that have good intentions in the space and and they help others. I'm gonna have their back. Pretty simple. Yeah. See, they always go back to the name calling, and yeah, not everyone that has blue hair is like a bleeding heart liberal or whatever. There's plenty of base chicks out there that have different colors in their hair, even out in farm country, like where I'm at. So teenage girl shit there. What's going on, Mr. Richard Hombre? What's going on? Welcome. Absolutely phenomenal campaign. Definitely check that out. We highlighted that last week. So Katie says, "How funny how y'all were telling me how awful they were treating me and the shit that they say. And now that I don't like y'all's book, now you want to play on the other side of the fence for no reason. This is why." And see, everyone sees that that's what's happening. They'll get into people's DMs, like, "Oh, I sympathize with you. I'm sorry that this is happening. Like, I'm your friend." And then they'll slowly start getting in your ear about EVS and other people, and like, "Yeah, you should have sympathy for me for all this bad stuff that's happened to me. Right? These are the bad guys, see?" And they try to turn you. But when you don't play along or you call them out on their bullshit, then they take shots at you and try to drag your name through the mud. So don't fall for it, people. What's going on, Mr. Patrick Quinlan? Look at me, look at me. So, Lady says, I find creating the name of character to be difficult. I find it easy to create a character with powers, personality, and a backstory, but naming eludes me and is a crucial part of comic. Yeah, that can be difficult. It did take me a while to come up with the names for my characters, but once I had figured out the powers and the personality for my characters, I tried to create the name based on, something symbolic that could tie in to their ability or abilities as well as their personality, or kind of do a mixture of personality and abilities. For example, Incubus in my book, right? The character that looks like Cthulhu, even though he's not inspired by Cthulhu. But it's Incubus because he's meant to look like an octopus. Because when essentially when he has the subjects undergo the mind control serum, after they have enough treatments, they start to see whatever Incubus tells them to see when he actually gets into their mind, right? Like the dirt worms are trying to get into our ears, right? He actually enters the subconscious, the mind of these subjects, and he can convince them, like when they see him, that his the tentacles of his mask are, twisting, and that they could like constrict him, choke him, and there's like ink spewing from its mouth from the mask, right? So hence ink as incubus. So just a kind of a bit of a play on words and all that. And so in Dread Knight, I have a good like explanation for the naming behind him and the character. It's because when the gargoyle, comes to life, when he's out on the streets, he's making his enemies dread the night versus basking in its inherent darkness, right? Because before he was around, they could just roam the streets, right? Terrorize, have fun, all of that. But now, because he's out there beating the shit out of these criminals, he's scarring them, he's making them actually dread nighttime, making them afraid to go out in public, to actually take part in crime, hence the name Dread Knight. So you can try to have fun with it, essentially. I ain't gonna bother with some of these comments because they're getting just nasty. Yep. All right. So think it's a good time for us to efap a video by Shane Davis. So Shane did a really good video about quality versus quantity. It was about a month ago or so, and yeah, I think can have a good discussion around that because he's one guy that, like me, gets called smug all the time, and he's very outspoken. He's honest about what he believes, and he gets a lot of shit for it. But I appreciate that he has that courage, and I agree with much of what he says. So it's a very good video for us to take a look at. So let me get this pulled up here. All right. Hate how it automatically puts the quality to like 240p. That's absurd. All right. Please give me some grace because I am still new to this, getting comfortable with it. All right, here we go. Let me know if there's any audio issues, but hopefully it will work.
Hello, guys. I am Shane Davis, Twitty, your comic book veteran. We're going to talk a little bit today about the next big hot piping issue in American comic book crowdfunding. And this is going to be, or just in comics in general, and this is going to be quality over quantity. And this is kind of like a term that usually got thrown around in the publishing industry, but mainly on the artist end of things is sometimes writers. But are you putting out, like, as an artist, are you trying to knock out as many issues a year as you can, or are you quite simply trying to make the very best X-Men annual, like Arthur Adams X-Men annual, you possibly can? Some people will get that reference, but it kind of pains me that this has to be reiterated because it was told to me when I went to Kubert school by the Kuberts in a lot of different times and points, either as an employee or as a student. And it is a decision I think every comic creator has to figure it out. You have to figure out what are you going for, what are your goals in this. And one of the things that gets talked about a lot in crowdfunding especially is late books, and I think to nauseum, I think sometimes it's a little bit more emphasis put on it than needs to be. I'm not going to say late books have helped at crowdfunding at all. I am not arguing that, but I don't know if it's the biggest issue people make it out to be. Now, late books for me, I've heard about for years, all the years I worked at DC Comics. I was either coming in to fill in for an artist who was late on a book. A lot of my career, early on in my career, I was just a fill-in artist looking for holes to get to do some work on. And then eventually I was a guy doing my own titles and sometimes needing a fill-in on those because I could only produce so many books a year. That was just the thing. I was a 6 issue a year type of guy until one year I said I'm doing 12 issues a year, and I did do 12 issues a year. So I've done it. I've done the fast work, I've done the super slow work, I've done the fill-in work, I've done the merchandising work. If it's comic work, I've probably done it, and then even some in movies and animation and just sculpture, stuff like that. So I've been all around, guys. I've had toys, all.
So that makes me think of one good point here too. Is that's the beauty of crowdfunding. One of them is you have all the time in the world, essentially. Now, obviously, it's debatable about if you put a estimated shipping date that may not be realistic, or again, people come into it and they may not expect it to take as long as it does, or again, they get really looped into the details and they end up taking a lot more time than expected. But you're not under this contract or this time expectation that you would have working for like the big two. So you have that option to take your time, be as detailed as possible, and you have that freedom to choose, right, how many pages you're going to do. You're going to do supplemental books and things of that nature. And so that gives independent creators the ability, in my opinion, to make an even larger impact than what someone in the mainstream might be able to do. Also, their hands could be tied to an extent of what they could put into the book, the styling of the art, there are a lot of things. There's a lot of constraints, but someone in the indie space has all the freedom to make it however they would like, which is fantastic, and that's what's exciting for me. I could go with a very, very unique artist for the line art that, that if I was right for the big two, they may give me someone that I personally wouldn't even think is a good fit for the characters and for the story, which would kill my soul. Like that's like and that's the other thing is that you have some writers in the indie space that they're in such a hurry to get a book out or meet this self-imposed quota of X amount of books per year that they're not getting the best fit when it comes to line art or coloring. Where me, after doing that mini comic and having my first campaign, I was so excited to be able to be like, okay, I have that freedom to figure out like, okay, who's the best fit for line art? What coloring style, right? Do I go with more of an image top cow style coloring, or do I go with more of a Frazetta style, like digital painted style? But I have that freedom to decide, to think on it, and then to execute with an artist that I feel is the best fit for the story and for the characters. A lot of writers in the big two and for the mainstream don't have that option. Same thing goes for directors and writers in film sometimes. They may not end up having, certain casted actors or actresses that they feel is a perfect or even a good fit for their story, but their hands are tied. Our hands are not tied, and that is awesome. The only thing that limits us, again, is reach and resources, but you still have that freedom within your reach and within your resources to find the best fit possible, especially if you're patient and you're not worried about rushing something out. And that was what's funny about that gentleman, Hero Shack, at the beginning, that was, you know, railing on me about the fact that I made a mini comic. I insulted the comics industry because it's not a traditional comic or whatever. Is he's constantly like, "Where's your first comic?" Right? You know what you're doing. Shouldn't take this long. There's no excuse for it to take a year to make a comic and blah blah blah. And I'm just like, dude, I'm not in a rush. My backers, people that listen to me, they know I don't want to hurry anything. I would much rather take a year or even a year and a half to put out this book and be incredibly detailed, make it the best it can be so that I wow them, that I make an impact so that they just can't wait for the next one versus, hey, I'm just going to rush it out in 4 to 6 months and I'll just settle on an artist, right? I'm not going to work with artist A or B because, they're trying to finish up another project. No, I'm going to sacrifice quality. I'm going to sacrifice that chance at wowing my readers, what, just to get it out more quickly? If you're really passionate about what you're doing, you wouldn't do that.
All of that stuff. So, one of the things I'm going to talk about here that will lean into this is where is the American comic book industry right now? That has a lot to do with the consumers, not so much the creators. I know everybody thinks it's all creator driven, but it's not. This is a picture from Baltimore Comic Con, which I attended this last year and set a booth up and only sold my independent stuff. And walking around the con, I noticed I don't know if I'd ever seen this much comics at a con in years. Old comics, long boxes, young couples, I'm talking men and women together digging through long boxes looking for back issues, omnibus being sold, and one of the few retailers that was actually selling like new comics had their comic stock marked off 50% off on Sunday. They're going to go nameless it for this video, but do know that was their cost for the books. Basically, they were like, just give us what we paid for these books and we'll take the loss for attending the con. And it was a really bad idea for us to try to sell these crappy Marvel DC books at this Comic Con because obviously people are buying backwards. Now, what has that got to do with crowdfunding? Well, in my opinion, it's got a lot. I do crowdfunding. We have a campaign up right now that's $250,000. Inglorious Rex 3 over $250,000. If you guys will please go back this campaign. If you are new to Inglorious Rex and you're like, but Shane, how do I buy Inglorious Rex 1 and 2? You can get them on our site, and these do ship out next day. So any
Preference is not equate to being an elitist. If I mean, think of it this way: there's a lot of conservatives in CG. Some of them might be okay with nudity in books. And I don't have a problem with some nudity in books, right? For an example, Sin City. I could have went without it, trust me. I'm not a fan of that in comics, but the writing and the storyline was so good that it didn't distract me or wasn't like bothersome. But if the entire book is a joke and just filled with nudity, then yeah, there's a pretty good chance a lot of people in CG are going to be like, no, this isn't my cup of tea. This isn't my preference, right? I want heroes or I want more of a gritty story, street level warfare, things of that nature. So preference does not make you an elitist. Neither does having standards. People aren't elitist because they don't like superhero films or they don't like horror films, for example. It's just a preference. That's it.
anything in our site, Nine Lives Comic Shop, that you see in our store, they do ship out next day if it's in the campaign. You are pre-ordering and you will get great stretch goals and stuff and all of this beautiful, artwork and books. There's 3 books in this campaign. So you will be waiting on 3 books total. A lot of great stuff to pick from over here. So what does this have to do with crowdfunding? Well, when I'm drawing a book, right? When I'm drawing a book, I'm not competing with what Marvel and DC is putting on the shelf. That's a fool's errand because Marvel and DC are beating this shit out of themselves with the glut, with the apathy that they've sown in readers, with the poor quality talent pool that they farmed for years, and all the talent they've ran off. Either they're too old to hire anymore, or they just don't want to spend the money on them. They want cheaper budgets for artists for declining sales and books. It's a race to the bottom, guys. So why would I compete with that? My goal as a publishing company isn't to put out 12 books a month. I'm watching Marvel and DC choke to death doing that with multiple titles. It's not working.
Yeah, but this is something I said in the last Dark Horse Discourse is that, in my opinion, if the big two were to focus on obviously quality versus quantity, right? But if they were to just focus on having some really big releases throughout the year, trim some of the fat, right? Some of these books that they don't have right names that are well known attached to the books, where the storylines are jokes, like this whole Harley Quinn fart book or whatever, right? Trim that fat and put your marketing efforts towards, hey, this year we're going to have this Silvestri book, right? We're going to have a new, Frank Miller book, another Alan Moore book. Put the attention around some big releases, hype it up. That's how you're going to bring back the traditional customers, the ones that have said, screw it, I'm done, right? The ones that were obsessed with comics, that collected them. If you want to actually get your sales to go up, you need to bring them back. You need to get them addicted to picking up books and collecting them. And in order to do that, you have to bring big names, names, and recognizable art. Not just releasing a bunch of books that are not going to excite people, that people are just going to walk by in the comic store. And they are also just trying to save money by, again, farming stuff out to lower cost countries, things of that nature, hoping that, oh, well, as long as it's got Batman attached to it, or as long as it's got all these different legacy character names attached to it, well, they're going to sell, right? Right? Well, no, not always. But if you do a Batman book with Frank Miller or Silvestri, Jim Lee, right? You name it, it's going to sell. So stop wasting all of your time and resources towards all these books that you know are not going to make an impact, right? They're not going to have a ton of people asking for the next issue and the next issue. Focus on bringing big names back into the space, put them on major characters, and market them. And then you'll have a chance to do the same with films too, because the films are losing steam just like the comics, because they're not focusing on bringing in big directors, big writers, big actors and actresses that can really bring some hype around it. Because and they've also burned too many directors and writers and artists and writers in the comic space as well. That too, exactly. Right? They're more focused on the message, on pushing politics than they are making quality books. And it's the same in the novel space, right? There's an agenda for all behind all of these literary agents. They want to push certain checks on a check or on a checklist or whatever, right? They don't want to push big stories or genres that are going to excite people. The well has been completely poisoned, and to an extent, the indie space is starting to get poisoned as well because people are starting to push quantity over quality, and people are coming in bragging about how many books they've released versus actually proving that, hey, look at the quality of the art, look at the story, look at the characters. It's all around how many have I done, or hey, look at all the boobs on my characters, like on the cover. Like, really? That's the focus? You think that's really going to bring a surge of health into the indie comic space? Because it's not going to. Pretty much, yep. They know what would stick though, and it's again the big names working on the big legacy characters. Why they're not putting their efforts towards that makes no sense. Maybe it's because those people don't want to push an agenda. I don't know. Yep, I agree.
Working for them, so why would it work for me? And here we go. The internet.
I want to hit on this question real quick. So Eccentric says, "Yo, Turner, I got another question. What age range do you think your books are best for?" I would say probably 14 and up, maybe even 15 and up. There's no like, there's nothing sexual in any of the books, but there is some violence for sure. It does have a grittier nature. There's some swearing and such, but so yeah, I would say right, someone that's entering high school and beyond would be okay with them for them.
Internet is starting to talk about it. What is professional? There's people at Iconic. I don't know a lot about them. Doug Ernst or something. I don't know. A little bit of back and forth here. But Eric July in the crowdfunding scene, I'm not really going to say anything positive or negative about him or his books, but it's starting to become up on a topic of him. This isn't about quality versus quantity. It's about professionalism, drive, ambition, and work ethic. I could argue as an artist, all of those things work ethic, ambition, drive, professionalism could be a guy that spends a week on a page and it looks like God level artwork. I would say that's Travis Charest. I would say it's ambiguous depending on what it is. Now, should a page take a week? Depends on what's on the page, depends on how important the book is. There's a lot of factors here. Or you could say these things are about stacking that paper. How many books a year can you put out? And personally, this is where it hits crowdfunding. I think I heard Perch talk something about it too, about that lateness hurting crowdfunding. Is when I'm making a book, I'm competing with all the great books in the past that Marvel and DC have done. Because me as a customer, I'm buying omnibus, I'm buying some manga, I'm buying what is good and what's coming out. And that's it. If it's not good, I'm not buying it. It doesn't matter how quick it comes out. And on the other side of the fence, I see your boy Zach over here. It hurts, man. It really hurts. I'll never be able to brag about fulfilling mediocre books on time. So there's two ends of the argument here. Am I racing to stack paper and get out, and maybe I put out a book that's subpar, or I'm going to meet Marvel and DC as a monthly publisher? And you have to understand, Marvel and DC are locked up and they're competing that doesn't mean they're competing because one of them's winning. It's about which one dies the slowest. They're both declining. In my opinion, they're not really working on in any end of the market. And again, I point to the omnibus market. The omnibus market is weird, and I'm a big customer of it, is because I'm going backwards, dude. I'm buying as a customer backwards. I can buy it digital, I can buy it so many ways. And I hate to tell everybody in comics and crowdfunding is like, as a customer, you're competing for my dollar just as much as Mark Texera Ghost Rider is collection that came out, or Age of Apocalypse.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting for me is like for me, I'm not looking other outside of Rook and some of the new stuff coming out of Machine, right? Like I'll pick up some of their stuff because it does actually look really good. I've enjoyed the Rook issue that I've gotten so far, but outside of that, I just have no interest in picking up anything new. Again, unless it's something from Silvestri or a big name, then I might give it a shot. But I'm going back and I'm just collecting older books by again the top notch writers like Miller, like Moore, right? People of that nature, like Marv Wolfman, and learning from those because I have very little faith that those new books will have an impact on me that'll be worth the money and that I'll learn much from them in comparison to the older books. And that's where it's like, what? I would rather take my time. And even if, and I don't plan on it, right? But even if I had to be late on a campaign in order to have an impactful book, I would rather do that than rush it out and then people be like, "Oh man, this is disappointing," right? And be bummed about the quality and actually see, right, the inherent issues with the art because of how it was rushed or the story or lack of editing or whatever. We've seen all of the cases, right? And so it's like, yeah, that's where a lot of people are going. They're just going back to buy older books that they know there's a higher chance that they're going to enjoy. And so, as an indie, if you really want to make a splash, if you really want to grow your reader base, you need higher quality, which means you're going to have a higher impact on the reader, which equates to having reader retention and backer retention. Otherwise, you're going to see a drop off campaign after campaign if you didn't make an impact, if you didn't wow those readers.
Omnibus. I'm not sure people buy comics because they need a new comic. Not now. At this point in time, customers have so many buying options, whether it be digital, whether it be trade paperback collections, whether it be omnibus. There are so many reasons for people not to just care that there's a new comic. I believe, and this is me, and I'm going to weigh in as a professional and as a guy who's worked years and a publisher, is that books have to matter. I mean, we're going to, at the American comic book industry, and everybody's talking about it. What's wrong with it? With a million YouTube channels where there's thinking critical, purge, Ethan Van Sciver, your boy Zach. What does it take to fix it? Okay, like we've all evaluated it. We've all checked the oil, the check engine lights on the fucking American comic book industry. We've all gotten our faces pushed in the mud by manga. But what does it take to fix it? Is it putting out monthly books? I don't know because Marvel and DC hasn't stopped doing that for years and it's still going down. I don't think quantity is the answer. Now, somebody's going to say, but Shane, you could do both. Both have happened, and there's very few comic creators that can do both. I'll be honest with you. Brian Azzarello's only ever written X amount of books per month. Jeff Johns, the same. Some of these guys tap out at a certain point because their egos say, what? Yeah.
So that's another thing too that people seem to forget is that an artist, let's say a line artist, right? Especially someone that's writing and doing the line art, it's going to take them a lot longer to do multiple books than say a writer. Where a writer, it's more heavily dependent on resources, right? You got to have the money to get commissioned art, right, all over the place. But it doesn't take nearly as as long to write a script. It's not nearly as difficult, right? So if you have a ton of money at your dispense, just like we've seen with Eric July, right? Like, yeah, you could easily have 4 or 5 books going throughout the year as long as you have the money to get all that stuff commissioned. You get the script done, right? You're just bouncing between the artists and getting everything done. But when you actually have to do the line art, and yeah, maybe you're getting 1 or 2 pages done a week or so, it's very unlikely that you're going to work on multiple books at a time. And if you do, well, then it means all of those books are going to take even longer. That's what's logical. And it's different too when you're working in the mainstream, for example, your sole focus is on, for example, the line art or the coloring or the writing. You're getting paid a salary to do that. You are not relying on getting funding from backers. You're getting paid right away. And so it takes a lot of that pressure off. The other thing is you don't have to worry about marketing. You don't have to worry about live streaming. You don't have to worry about paying bills. You don't have to worry about commissioning. You don't have to worry about any of that. It's all handled by the company. So you can just churn out work. But as you know, when you're doing crowdfunding, I mean, you're the one that's got to do thumbnails. You're the one that's got to do some Photoshop work. You got to be the one on Twitter marketing. You got to be the one on YouTube during marketing. You got to find the artist. You got to do all, you got to do everything. So, yes, it's going to take much, much longer. But yes, there are some writers, or even, might as well just call them a coordinator, right? In the indie space that, yeah, they're doing several books a year, but that's because there's minimal creative work, right? It's more just managing the team, which many of us do in our day jobs, right? There are thousands, tens of thousands of managers in the corporate world that do just that every day. It's not something special if you're doing it in comics or indie comics. Same concept. And so, yeah, you'll see writers just bragging, like, oh, I'm doing all these books. And it's like, well, yeah, because once your script is done, you're just sitting and waiting for art, right? You're doing some collaboration with the artist and all that, but it's much easier than if you're the artist and the writer. It's completely different.
Yeah, I could write an extra book a month at DC, but the reality is either my life's going to be hell or my quality is going to suffer. You're going to have to turn loose of something. And some guys are just like, their egos like, no, my books are this quality no matter what. And I don't know, with all the buying options for any consumer right now, I feel like we have to make books that matter. I really do. I think we have to make quality books. Now, does that mean that one day I couldn't just flip off of YouTube and quit YouTube completely and I could stamp out like 8 crowdfunded books a year? Sure. But who's going to advertise it? Who's going to market it? Who's going to tell
Yep.
people and show people why they should care? Like there's a lot of things to the crowdfunding thing when I heard Purge talk about it that kind of bothered me, which is marketing, which is fulfillment. There's so many factors that come along with crowdfunding that it may actually slow the average comic artist down. And that's actually, I hate to tell people, what keeps most people from crowdfunding comics is the idea of fulfillment. If you talk to comic pros at a comic con or something like that, and every time they talk to me that I'm doing crowdfunding, they're like, so how do you do the fulfillment? I'm like, with 2 hands. That's how we do it. We do it with 2 hands and our feet. It's like, oh, and they can't do that. That's beyond them. And that's gonna be the big barrier, I think, for a lot of comic pros. And that's a whole nother argument. But do know, I think like just putting out, especially when you're expecting somebody to pay shipping, I don't know if they just need another monthly comic. I don't know if that's there. And if it is there, and people are going to say, but Shane, Batman. It's like, again, there you go, Batman. It's going to be a legacy character that has a built-in fan base that they can't wait to spend more money on Batman, and they're into Batman comics and they're completionists and all that stuff. In the indie sphere, guys, we don't really have that because we don't have legacy characters. At best,
Yep. And that's the other thing I've noticed too with some indie comic creators. They're so focused on quantity and trying to brag about, doing more than 2 or 3 comics in a year that they're actually going too fast, in my opinion, because there's a a lot of backers, they're backing a lot of campaigns. They may not read your comic right away. Um, they may not be ready to back your second campaign just a month or two later. The other thing is you're not giving yourself enough time to garner or gain a, YouTube subscriber base or Twitter following. It might be make more sense to wait 6 months or wait a year and try to get like another 1,000 followers or get 500 subscribers on YouTube, right? Get known more on other streams so that maybe you can get an extra 10, 20, 50% backers as a result. But if you're essentially just marketing to the exact same backers that you had on book one, there's always going to be some that people are going to lose, whether it's because of your opinions or maybe they didn't like the book, who knows? Or maybe just they didn't have the money the second go around. Everyone's circumstances are different throughout the year. And so you've seen people that have just rushed trying to get books out, but then they get a significant drop off during their second or third campaign. And it's like, they thought that being able to say, hey, I turned it around quick, I lowered my price, like they're just going to get more backers. But I'm actually seeing the opposite in many cases. And it's like, hey, maybe you should have taken some time, tried to, use the reviews, use the art from your first book. Again, grow your following base, get some hype up for the second book. Maybe slowly release some art from the second book so that you can get hype around it and really go all out on the marketing and just maximize your results in the book, in the second book. And then again, rinse and repeat in the third book. Once you have that larger following base or backer, you know, list essentially, then it's easier to pump them out quicker because you can have more confidence that you're going to be able to raise enough money to keep going. The other thing is, did you up your game from book one to book two? Let's say you were concerned about having enough budget, raising enough money in the first book, but you raised more than you expected. So did you take that and say, "Hey, I'm gonna upgrade, right? I'm gonna hire an even more detailed line artist or up the colors, up the page count, something to be like, hey guys, I'm up in my game. Get ready for the second issue, right?" But again, their focus is more on price and quantity, and I don't think it's helping a lot of people out. Like I want to have almost a slow burn going into my first comic issue, just like I did for the novels and a mini comic, right? Start getting people's interest peaked. Release some art over time, get a sign up list. Treat that sign up list like it's your campaign. Practice your marketing techniques. Practice how you're going to push tweets, how you're going to send, emails to the sign up list. See what resonates with people and what doesn't, what gets engagement, what gets reach so that once you launch your campaign, it's like you can go full tilt. Too many people, I think, are trying to rush it because again, this whole narrative around around quantity has kind of twisted what they think the expectations of backers are. And the thing is, not you can't have the same expectations for a traditional crowdfund as you would from a pre-order campaign from someone with a large following. And too many people are, I think, starting to have the same expectations.
Yes, we have speculators for number one issues. And then from there, you better catch them. You better hook them with the story or something because you got to keep them coming back for more. And that's going to come down to not how many books you can stack up per year, but it's actually going to come down to did they care about the book they read? Are they invested in the story? Your protagonist, was the art pretty? It could be a lot of things. It could be a lot of factors there. And there are a lot of factors to comics. If it was easy, Marvel and DC wouldn't be dying. If you guys will hit like, subscribe, ring the bell for notification, let me know what you think about this subject. I'm sure it's a hot subject, and I'll get hell for this video one way or the other. I'll leave you guys with a trailer for Inglorious Rex 3. Make sure.
So yeah, I think that was very well put, especially from the perspective of someone that's worked in the big two, right? That is a professional artist. And yeah, I think people new people coming into the space need to listen to more voices like this. Again, to just take a step back and be like, okay, what should my focus be on? Should it be around how many books I can put out per year? Should it be around how do I make an impact with the reader? How do I actually hit the ground running and make sure that I can retain my backers and grow my reader base? Right. So let's look at another ridiculous tweet. Ties right into this. Let's see. So again, when people speak their mind, criticize popular YouTubers, and then they get agitators on their nuts. So another post from Student of God says blood sport tactics. And this is pertains to the whole Gothics TV being hired by Eric July. It says from the moment Gothics TV was hired, this tactic has been used. So far, they have two clips of content, which has given hours of content to several pocket watchers. Oh dear, people clipping videos. Wait, that's what he does to me and many people, and then spreads them around in DM groups, and all the agitators retweet them. Wait, hmm. I'm smelling some irony. Anyhow, misspelled their out space rage content. Number one, they have given her a job title that she does not have. Strawman. Okay. She does not know comics, which is true. She only needs to know Ripperverse comics for her job, not for the job you made up. Well, she admitted she didn't even know the Ripperverse comics when she got hired, so puts a big hole in that argument. And three, comic elitist. Yes, Shane Davis is a smug elitist. You can't like a comic unless it has his approval quality. You guys just saw the same video as I did that Shane did. And I'm sure you've all seen other streams and videos that he's done or been in. Nowhere does he say, You can't like a book I don't like," or "You can't like a book that isn't up to my standards or expectations." I'm quite confident, similar to what I had said earlier in the stream, that he has different expectations from creators based on their experience, their resources, right? He's going to have a higher expectation from a professional artist or from a YouTuber with a huge base and a lot of money versus a brand new creator like myself, for example. But I guarantee you, if the smaller creator puts a ton of effort into it and gets some eye-catching art out there, he's going to put a lot more attention and a lot more of his spotlight on that versus a pro or a popular YouTuber that does a subpar book. So yeah, this is their ridiculous little circle here. It says CG concern troll super chat. They respond efap it outrage. Hmm. Had some trolls in the chat today, and then most likely people like Student of God is going to quote tweet or clip it, right? And then he's going to try to create outrage by twisting things out of context, and the cycle just continues. So yeah, very ironic post there. But while we're at it, let's pull up Shane's campaign here. All right, so he is at $261,000 and $328 on his Nine Lives Comics website. I think he also has over like $40,000 on Indiegogo, so quite possibly over $300,000 on a number three. So that's fantastic retention and growth from campaign to campaign. It's a perfect example of what folks should be striving for, right? Upping their game and trying to up their back account from campaign to campaign. So I'm very excited for this book. Again, 48-page graphic novel, and it's about fighter Alex Stone, who steps for the first time into the world of Rex fighting, where 20 tons of genetically manipulated clones are hitched to the neural systems of their human pilots, twisted together in no holds barred, high stakes cage fighting. So, again, fantastic art tied to this project, really intriguing characters and designs and storylines. So, this is what we need more of. And this is what you would expect from a professional creator. So, he's living up to those expectations, which is awesome. So, definitely check that out. And then let's also pull up the Vigilantes Creek campaign. So, as I think most of you know, this campaign will be ending before the end of February, so in less than 4 weeks. And let me get this up here. Too many tabs. All right. So we did cross $12,000 the other day. So we're at 12,015 with just over $1,500 on Fund My Comic. So another $1,500 would be able to hit 15,000 across both platforms. Would love to get Indiegogo as close as possible to 15K in the next 4 weeks. Again, we do have some original art that's still available. Everything's in stock. So if you order, you're going to get it shipped out within a couple of days. And every dollar that I make in this campaign goes directly into the first comic issue. I'm about 20 pages deep into the comic script, and that's with several revisions now at this point. About another 28 pages or so to go. Got some character designs underway, and so hopefully I'll be announcing the artist and the creative team here in the next couple months. Maybe even have some art released and a sign up page. So extremely excited to get that ball rolling and get that stuff out in front of you guys. So again, um, the more that this raises, the quicker that first comic issue will come to life, and the more that will be done before the campaign launches. So the quicker, essentially, it'll be in folks' hands. So um, definitely, please check this out if you can. There's two novels and a mini comic. Yes, a mini comic. It's going to piss people off when they hear that. Well, it's going to piss off one person, um, but yeah, it's about a gargoyle and a team of vigilantes fighting terror in Detroit. If you're a fan of Lovecraftian horror, as well as the writings of Frank Miller, Alan Moore. If you're looking for a very gritty, street level urban scene with a lot of violence and vigilantism, this is the book for you. So please check it out. If you ever have any questions, feel free to shoot and reach out, and I will answer them to my best ability. Appreciate everybody checking that out. All right. So appreciate everybody swinging by and entertaining the trolls in the chat. Seems like they got bored once you stop pulling up their responses. But hey, once you start insulting, whether it's myself, like whatever, you can take your shots at me, but start insulting my friends and people in the chat, well, then I'm not going to pull up your nonsense. And my mods have the ability to mute you, block you, whatever, if you cross lines. So, but yeah, thank you everybody for swinging by. I think EBS is streaming, so go ahead and get your um, daily dose of trash cast. And I think even John and Shane are streaming over on Rumble possibly. So go check them out. Tomorrow we have Comics Gate Commandos over on Patrick Quinlan's channel. So please go check that out. Make sure you're subscribed. And also check out Katie Did's Good Morning Comics Gate on Monday mornings, where she's always promoting some fantastic campaigns. And yeah, let's support people in the space here. Let's help people grow together, and yeah, let's show the mainstream some quality, right? All right. Thank you guys. Have a good night and God bless.